Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I wanted to show you really an immortal blindfolded game between Magnus Carlsen and Boris Gelfand from 2011, and the game was played in Monaco. So this is really incredible chess game, and this game was recommended to me by one of my followers, Sahil. Sahil, thank you very much for showing me this game because I haven't seen this game in my life so far. Incredible blindfolded game, incredible trap that Boris Gelfand will set up here for the young Magnus Carlsen, because in 2011 young Magnus Carlsen wasn't still the world champion in chess, but he was really the best, I think, even in 2011. And Magnus Carlsen really knows how to play the blindfolded games. I've seen also in one documentary that he played 10 blindfolded games at the same time, which it's really incredible. So it's also not something that bothers, I think, Magnus Carlsen, this blindfolded games. On the other hand, Boris Gelfand, and I think a similar player to him is maybe Vasily Ivanchuk. When you fall in their opening traps, in their tactical ideas, then you cannot get out very easily. And also here Magnus Carlsen, see what Boris will do in this particular game to him. So let's check out now the game. It was, as I said, really incredible game. D4 played by Magnus Carlsen. Knight to f6 by Boris. C4, G6, Knight to f3, Bishop to G7. So far the King's Indian, and after G3 we have this normal variation. In some occasions it's also called the Carlsbad variation, and I've explained this Carlsbad variation from Black's perspective. If you want to study more about the King's Indian, you can also check out my King's Indian defense series, in which I show you an effective way how to play as Black the King's Indian. I've created more than 45 videos, so you can maybe have a good preparation. I'll show you, of course, the link of the video of the playlist of that very nice defense at the end of this video, so you can maybe study a new opening. So G3, castling, Bishop to G2, still normal theory, of course, and now comes a very aggressive move, C5. Okay, there are now basically two good choices, D5 or maybe to develop normally here with Knight to C3. If you play D5, it creates, of course, first of all, an advantage for white. It's the space advantage, because we want to create spaces in chess, but also it creates a disadvantage, because when we evaluate this bishop's activity, first of all, this bishop, the light square bishop of whites, is then blocked out by its own pawn. So on the other hand, this move D5 opens also the long diagonal, the long dark square diagonal for black. So when we evaluate the bishop's activity on G2 and also the bishop's activity on G7, I think black has a slightly advantage, but when it comes to space, then white has, of course, this advantage. So there are always in chess disadvantages and advantages, so that's why every move has to be calculated from the beginning. So here D4, Magnus plays a more flexible line with the move Knight to C3. He wants, of course, to keep his diagonal here open, and that's why C takes D4, Knight to D4, and in some occasions there are some tactical threats after Knight to C6. Here then the knight could be in danger, because the bishop is also attacking here the weak knight a little bit on D4. But in the game, Boris plays a very aggressive line, plays the move Queen to C7, attacking the pawn on C4. If you play something like B3, then of course you opening again the long diagonal for the dark square bishop. That was the main problem, I think, for in the setup of whites. In the game, Knight to B5, this is still common theory. It has been played many times in chess history, this line, and now comes really the most aggressive line with Queen to C4, sacrificing a pawn here by Magnus Carlsen, but for the initiative, of course, because that's always one of my suggestions. You shouldn't play so early with your queen in the game, because when you play that, then of course your opponent can attack your queen, can create many tempos. And here B3 played by Magnus, we have Queen to C5, and now Bishop to A3. You see, Magnus has developed all of his minor pieces now, has a great activity, which is of course a great compensation for one pawn. You have all of your pieces out, you have all of your minor pieces out, and what we want to do is now, of course, secure simply the king. And Queen to B6 was played. In the game, Bishop to E7, we have Rook to E8, and here in this particular moment, Boris Gelfand set up here really a deadly trap for Magnus Carlsen, because Magnus played here a very interesting line, knight to d6, which was, I think, a mistake in the game, because a more normal idea, I think, is to play rook to c1, and then after rook takes e7 we have rook takes e8, and this game can be played, I think, after knight to e8. It's playable for both sides. I think black will simply rely, of course, again on this long diagonal. On the other hand, black has also some troubles with his isolated pawn on d7. This could be playable, but Magnus falls for this Boris Gelfand trap with knight to d6. Here rook takes e7 was played, and now knight to c8. That was, I think, the main tactical preparation here by Boris Gelfand. It seems so that something went wrong, because the queen is attacked, the rook is attacked, but here first we have, of course, the move queen to b4, and this wasn't played in the game. Magnus played king to f1, but queen to d2 is also very risky, because queen takes d2 can be played, king takes d2, but now knight to e4, and the problem is now you cannot play king to d3 because you get knight to f2, the fork. So what could you do? Maybe king to c2, again rook to e8, maybe we can take, but we can also take out this one, and you see again you have some tactical problems here around the square d4. You could maybe try e3, but now bishop to f8, that was also a very nice tactic. Here locks really the knight. The knight cannot escape anymore. It cannot escape on b6, it cannot escape on d6, it cannot escape on e7, so it's basically lost game here for Magnus. So really interesting line with the sacrifice. King to f1 was played, so that's why here by Magnus Carlsen we have rook to e4. Very cool move by Boris Gelfand. If you take bishop takes e4, this wasn't again played in the game, but you get the knight to e4 again. Your knight on d4 is hanging. You have to protect your knight with e3, but now knight to c6, and again we have taken out, you see, the very important squares for the knight. The knight cannot jump on e7, again on d6 and b6. Very nice trap. If you try knight takes c6, b takes c6, and now rook to c1, we can take, and I think from this point on it's basically game over. Maybe we could take here this pawn, but still I think black can regroup, black can keep a compact position, and will continue the game with two minor pieces against the rook. With a weak king like this, with this light square problem in front of the king, I think black has really dominant and comfortable game. So that's why Magnus tried here knight to c2, getting out of the range of the rook. You see, very nice rook sacrifice, potential rook sacrifice by Boris Gelfand. Played here really an active game. Knight to c2, we have queen to f8, knight to d6, and now rook to e6, attacking the knight. We have knight takes b7. If you try maybe a better knight to c6, it's also a very interesting line, because we can simply, I think, develop normally, and after something like knight to e3 in order to regroup. d5 is, I think, again a great move. You cannot take, because again you lose some material on the long diagonal. So very nice line, and you see we are threatening also the move d4. So this pawn, which was basically our main disadvantage in black's position, as I mentioned in the beginning, is now our main strength in this particular line, because we can advance the pawn. This pawn is supported, and here again there are some tactical threats on the long diagonal. So very interesting line. So rook to e6, knight takes b7 played by Magnus, and now knight to c6 again traps the knight, which is really incredible. The knight again cannot escape, which is the main problem in the game. Rook to c1 was played, rook to b8, and now knight to d4. We have rook takes b7, knight takes e6, and now after f takes e6 we have now a new position in which again Boris Gelfand has two minor pieces for the rook, and I think it's a much better game here for black, because first of all we have now these two powerful centralized pawns. We can create dynamics in the center with this supported bishop on g7. This rook still of course needs some improvement, but we can improve it very fast, so it's not a problem. This rook will be improved. In the game Magnus tried bishop takes c6, we have b takes c6, and now queen to d4, rook to f7, and now king to g2, finally getting the king secured, but it's a little bit too late because knight to d5 was played, and now Magnus plays queen to c5, simplifies the position. Bishop to d4. Why did Magnus Carlsen basically force a trades of queens? Because there is also one rule, I think, when you play the game with a rook against two minor pieces, and I've explained this idea also in one of my videos, of my basics in chess videos. When you're playing with the rook and against two minor pieces. It's very, very important to get rid of the queens. That's the main idea that you have, basically, because when you have the queens on the board, then the queen is functioning much better with the knight, with the bishop. Combined with the knight, I think the queen can create some madness. But if you simplify the position, if you maybe go into an endgame, maybe you have a rook and one pawn against two minor pieces, then it could be a draw. So that's why here at least Magnus Carlsen tries this idea to simplify the position by trading off the queens, but it doesn't bring you so much because Boris plays now really an active game here. Bishop takes d4 and then rook to f2. You say king to h3. The king is really endangered. It was simply too late for Magnus to castle, to go with the king into security with king to g2, and now here rook takes e2. It's basically game over. Everything is protected. You see the e6 pawn is protected. Now we have a pass pawn, rook to f1, and now h5, creating also some breathing spaces for the king, so there are no checks possible. Here rook to c1, and now king to g7, rook to c2, rook takes c2, rook takes c2, and now e5. Everything is glued together. We can also try in some occasions, if necessary, knight to c3. Everything is compact. This bishop is very important, protects both of these pawns, and also protects the potential active move with knight to c3. So rook to c6, we have a knight to b4, rook to c7, king to f6, a3, and again knight to d5. Another problem. Well, here the rook cannot simply attack the king just by itself. You have to have some kind of supportive piece. Here king to g2, we have e4, king to f1, e3, king to e1, king to e4. Very active king. Even if you try to do something, again, we can hide with our king. No perpetual checks are possible here, so that's why here rook to d6, we have g5 by Boris, b4, and now knight to c3. As I said, this was our main goal. Rook to g6, g4, rook to h6, and now king to d3, rook takes h5, and this is now game over, because here in this particular move, knight to e4, and after rook to d5, knight to d2, in this position, Magnus Carlsen resigned because the serious tactical threat. Let's see, a bad move, b5, then you get knight to c3, knight to f3, attacking the king, and now this pawn can move further, and of course it supports also the e1 square, and it's game over. A really incredible attack by Boris Gelfand. Great tactics, great opening preparation. I think Magnus fall here really into a Boris Gelfand trap. I think this was homemade preparation by the legendary Boris. It's a really interesting game if you think about it more. It's really a blindfolded game. I'm not sure how many of us can play really a decent blindfolded game. As I said, I've watched really a documentary. Magnus Carlsen played 10 blindfolded games at the same time. Really incredible stuff in chess, what you can do. And I think this was a really cool game. Again, thank you, Sahil, for pointing me out this game. Really incredible game. And I hope you can maybe suggest me more of similar games, because sometimes it's really hard for me to find really interesting games. Many of them have been revealed so far and maybe have been watched many times. I think this was a gold mine, this game. I think it was a really incredible game by the legendary Boris. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more tactical and beautiful games like this, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's the link, and here's also the link to my King's Indian series if you want to study this opening from Black's perspective. And here's also the video how to play with the rook against two minor pieces, when you should go into this particular lines. This is from my basics in chess series, which I've covered so far, more than 160 videos about chess strategy. You can also check out this video, and if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.